It is with great excitement that I introduce back for an encore talk, because we just could not get enough of him yesterday with all the great insights he was sharing. Tom Gruber, Impact Advisor, Humanistic AI. Tom, take it away. The camera and floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Molly. I appreciate it. This is a great opportunity to share with you an idea actually you suggested, which was people were asking, like, what is your philosophy, your guiding philosophy in your career, and kind of the story behind that. And so I thought, well, let me share something with you about that, put it into a talk. That's this is basically the idea here, is that if you have a philosophy, a guiding philosophy for your work, it'll actually improve the way you do your work. And I think this is borne out for me and other people. So I'm going to share some ideas about my design philosophy, my career philosophy, and how it has shaped some of the things that I've been lucky enough to participate in as an inventor, and as an entrepreneur, and as an investor. So if the slides are turning, are the slides turning, folks? If they're not, please stop me.
Yes.
This gentleman is one of my heroes. His name is Doug Engelbart. He has a guiding philosophy. When he was a young engineer, he started out thinking, well, I have a career ahead of me. What do I do with my career? How do I guide my career? And so he thought, well, this was in the 60s. Oh my God, the world's coming to an end. We've got the Vietnam War, and the government seems to be falling apart, breakdown in society. We've got an eco crisis with the pollution, and the world's coming, they basically saw a lot of what's happening now back then. And he said, well, what can I do as an engineer? And he said, well, you know what? Most of these mistakes are being made because people are not coping with our urgent problems collectively. That is, individually, people are smart and doing amazing things, but collectively, we're not doing so well as a society. So he decided to create technology that would make people more intelligent collectively. And he guided his entire career based on this philosophy. And it turned out to pay off pretty well. I don't know how many of you know Doug Engelbart or what he's done, but Doug is one of the most famous people in the history of technology and computers. In the 1960s, that was what, 60 years ago, he invented the graphical user interface and the mouse, the thing we all use every day. He invented the idea of hypertext and how it's used in the web today, the idea that you bounce from one document into another one. This was before computers had graphical screens, before computers, there was nothing like the web. In fact, he was node number 3 on the internet. He also invented the idea and built a whole bunch of tools about how you have people working together and being together socially on a computer. It was a radical concept back then. And in fact, he started the whole field of human-computer interaction. Now, all of those were deliberate career choices. He didn't invent the mouse because he thought, playing around with the screen was cool, because he invented the mouse because he wanted the hypertext to work so he could have social software so that he could make people smarter collectively. And I was influenced by that. And I think that it's one of the lessons is at the first meta level, it helps to have a guiding philosophy. It's a real good idea. And so when I sat down to have mine, I thought, well, I'm an AI guy. I've been doing artificial intelligence for over 30 years. And when I was starting out in my career in grad school, I was thinking, well, what should I do? Well, what most people do, and the famous people that we all read about in AI, a lot of them, they have figured out how to make scalable businesses, Google and Facebook and so on. The AI technology is about better, cheaper, faster automation of human intelligence. And we celebrate when it beats us at Go or chess or whatever. And unfortunately, this philosophy, that there's an implied philosophy behind those kind of choices, which is, unfortunately, that same philosophy leads us to build AI that has displaced human work and is, in fact, having unintended consequences in the fact that it's used to exploit our weaknesses. Now, I don't want to go that way, and I made a choice early on that the goal isn't about making businesses or making money. I think that follows. The goal is to help people at scale. And so the scalability is clear there, but it's all about how do you help a lot of people? Because I know a lot of people I respect that help a few people intensely well, but I want to just help a lot, and in particular, help them live better, more intelligent lives. So my tactic wasn't to build better, faster, cheaper. but to build technology that makes people better. And the technique here, the strategy, is to build AI that, instead of competing with you, augments you and works with you as a teammate. And my intended consequences have always been around augmenting human intelligence, collectively and individually. So that's the philosophy: create artificial intelligence that meets human needs by augmenting and collaborating with them instead of people. Now, it doesn't have to be your philosophy, but everyone has one. And then this has guided my choices in my career. So I can start with a few examples. Let's start with something called augmented communication. Now, when I was in graduate school, I was at a place where some of the earliest work in neural nets was happening, earliest work in computer vision. Exciting place, AI, symbolic knowledge systems. And I had a choice of projects, and the department chair gave me this one, which was how to help people who have some profound disability, like severe cerebral palsy, who can't speak, can't do what I'm doing right now, can't articulate speech. They can usually move a muscle here or there, but it's a really tough situation to be in. And so what could we do? In 1983, we invented some techniques so that you could hook up a computer to the earliest portable computers that existed to a wheelchair, and so that someone could click on a switch and they could drive a computer, which then would generate speech. This is what you've seen. Stephen Hawking has a system like this. Now, the technique, the AI techniques, were about accelerating the value of that input using that language prediction, and of course, making good speech output. This is the same kind of thing we do now when we text, and it accelerates and predicts what we're trying to type, but it was done a while ago, 30 years ago. So since then, the technology has improved. I'm advising a company called Cognition, which not only can let people who are profoundly disabled click with a finger or something, but they can also use their eyes to drive a computer, which can then generate speech. And this is a durable medical appliance. It actually works and it can be prescribed by speech therapists to scale. It's really heartening to see that it's come to this. And this is using now this new fancy AR techniques, these cameras that can read your face and identify your identity and see where you're looking. It turns out it also uses modern AI techniques, so machine learned deep neural nets, to make sense of the data coming off of this. Now, what's even more mind-blowing is that there are some folks who are actually locked in entirely, who can't really articulate well with their eyes, but they still have fully intact minds, and they need to be able to express themselves. And for that, this company is coming up with the ability to speak only with your brain, to be able to use the brainwave detection on the back of your occipital lobe of your brain to detect what you're looking at, what you're thinking about when you're looking at a visual field, and then use that to generate speech. And here's an example. This is a professor who had a severe disability. He had a brain stroke and couldn't speak. He used to speak 7 languages when he was able. So he wrote this using the system. Medicine is an art as well as a science, and great art requires great imagination, the capacity for empathy. Take the opportunity to see your own suffering in the suffering of others. For when you can see others' suffering as your own, you will be greatly rewarded. Now, those are profound thoughts that from a profound mind that is no longer trapped behind his body. And that kind of work is because this team made a choice to use AI to augment human beings. Now then, this is fast forward a couple of decades. I started my first big company, which was in the concept of collective intelligence. So if say language augmentation helps an individual be more effective, more capable, we were looking on both like Engelbart problem of scalable intelligence. So here's the problem. When 2 or 3 of us get together, we're pretty fully human. We can think and do things really effectively. When we get into maybe a family or a tribe size, we still can function as with like our full intelligence. But when we get into larger groups than that, the more people are put together, the dumber they are collectively. And this is just a property of the way we evolved and the way we organize ourselves. I thought of a solution, partner solution, which is to make it so that when people work together, they don't reinvent the wheel. They learn from everyone else continuously. Basically, there's a collective memory. And we built a company around this. It had 200 corporate clients, had thousands and thousands of users. It was actually effective. You'd never heard of it because it collapsed during the dot-com recession. But it was used a lot because it allowed virtual communities to collaborate. Back when there was nothing but Lotus Notes for collaboration software. You could think of this as like a Slack of the day, but combined with a Google of the day. We had a Google-like search engine that you could have Slack going on in thousands and thousands of communities, and then you could search over everyone's work and learn from everyone. And it also had a feature that you don't see much today, which is proactive subscription that would send out notifications so that if someone else was doing something that was interesting to me, it would proactively tell me that. This actually did work, and you can produce collective intelligence with technology if we organize it the right way. Then the next company was about collected intelligence. This is the Web 2.0 era. Remember when there was Flickr and all these companies? They were the first ones to show the value of user-contributed content at scale. So my entry in this was travel. So the problem is, I would love to travel. Traveled all my life, but every time I go to someplace, I want to meet someone, talk to someone who's been there before, and I want to follow in their best practices, in their footsteps. So the way to do that is to talk to them, but you can't talk to a million people. So what's the Web 2.0 way of doing that? That is to essentially collect, kind of like introspect, collect a corpus of experience. When people travel, collect what they experienced, where they went, and what they enjoyed, what they ate, what they did, and then put that into a giant knowledge base, and then use AI to harvest lessons learned and knowledge from that you could then use to help someone else decide where to travel. So we built a company called Real Travel, and it was wonderful. We had millions of users. Basically, if you were a world traveler, this was like your blogging tool. You'd like blog your trip around the world. And everywhere you went, you'd take photos, and the system would worry about organizing it into an amazing website where everything was indexed, everything was searchable, and you could browse around. And so, like, here's an example of Thailand. You could browse around all the photos taken in Thailand, or those just taken in Chiang Mai, or whatever. There's all kinds of ways you could play with it. Now, what's amazing here is that by making a site where everyone had a collective interest in either participating as a sharing person, as a traveler, or as a research person, there was an increasing returns effect. There was a network effect. So people could share. This is the best way you could share. You had the most beautiful blogs, and people could research. Now, the really cool thing we didn't anticipate until we did this is once we built this corpus of human knowledge, we're making individuals happy and more effective, but also we wanted to make the collective more hectic. How would you make everyone smarter about travel? Well, one way is to use AI to figure out what people are saying and thinking about and doing in their travels, and then be able to share that out. And the way we did that is like we did what they call clustered, semi-unstructured learning, where you kind of shake it around and figure out where the clusters are, learned what the deep structure is in that content, and then create a synthetic interviewing process, like an expert system that interviews you about what kind of travel you like to do. And it would actually ask you questions that were based on the deep learned structures in the content, and then give you like a custom travel guide about places you might want to go and things you might want to do. It was a ton of fun. I really liked it. And it was also a sign of the times that the previous company had over 200 people. This one had 5 people. And you could do almost the same thing because the technology had gotten much easier. Then there was this thing, a personal assistant. Now here's the thing. I've done a couple of pieces in collected intelligence, wanted to return back to individual intelligence. And the big problem here is I looked around and we had, this is in 2007, we have the Apple iPhone had just come out. It was awesome, but it was expensive and most people didn't have one. But even if they did, it was just the very beginning. And it was like the web browser and email and whatever else, camera all in one. Now, then you had Google, which in 2007 was already awesome. But even then, there were some people who were really good at Google, and some people who were really good at using the little screen on the phone, and a lot of people who weren't. But I noticed that a lot of people didn't even know you could do some of the things you could do with the web and with the phone. And in fact, it wasn't just the phone. The technology around us is like this amazing bounty we've inherited, and yet most people don't get the full benefit of it. So we thought, well, why don't we use AI to give everybody augment everybody with the ability to have the benefit of the technology. So as you can guess, the solution here is what we ended up calling the virtual assistant, which is essentially just removing all the friction in the user experience so that all you have to do is just say what you want. And then it's the job of the AI to figure out what you want, figure out how to accomplish the task, and then do it for you. And that, of course, was Siri. Now, just to give you a sense of where this context was, 10 years ago, when we launched Siri, this is the app before Apple. The straw man was Google. And they said, well, why would you need an assistant? Because you have Google. And if you ask Google, where can I have dinner next Wednesday? And you're here, you get a bunch of blue links and some green links that are completely irrelevant to your query because it wasn't any of those things. It was a general search engine for retrieving documents. It wasn't an assistant. And they've got an assistant now, which is awesome. But the point is, that was the straw man. And then you compare what was there to what was released as an app. I'm very proud of this little team of 24 people. Came up with an assistant that had voice and text input. It had semantic natural language parsing. It had dozens of domains and I think 40 or 50 service providers like OpenTable, LinkedIn. It had not only the ability to get an answer in a chat, but also mixing in the GUI. It was innovation in how you mix GUIs with chat conversation into a single new user interface paradigm. And most overlooked was the fact that this was about doing things. It wasn't about researching. It was about getting things done, like confirming restaurants or getting tickets or just even finding your way with navigation. And it was seeing not only the idea that you could make people effective at sort of something like search, but you could make them effective in their life, carrying a mobile device around, driving around, getting through life that way. So it turned out to be a hit. Obviously, it was a good time for it, and the AI part was really hard, but it was a good time for AI too. We had enough of the elastic cloud. We have enough compute power in the phone. A few other things that were there. A lot of APIs to play with. And so we were lucky enough to be able to launch with success. And then, of course, Apple picked it up, and then we had a long run at Apple. Now, what was really cool about that is the Apple experience was, I can't really talk about what we did there, but I ran this advanced development group there where we could come up with sort of the next generation of things, next features, next ideas. And the major thing that was gratifying for us was that everyone there believed that their work really mattered because it impacted hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions of people's lives. And it really did impact, and it wasn't just like a talking point. And if we made a mistake in the user experience, hundreds of millions of people would suffer from it. If we gave them something that would make them live a better life, they would all benefit. So that was reminding me how important it was that the philosophy help us choose our problems and our solutions by its impact on human life. And I think it made a big difference. Now, today, I'm not at Apple anymore. I retired a couple of years ago. I'm doing what I call impact advising, which is choosing projects based on their potential impact on human life. So mostly AI projects. And the idea here is, again, I'm looking for opportunities where AI isn't just scaling a thing that makes more money or makes it cheaper, but AI is augmenting something that humans want augmented, that need help with. So for instance, here's these glasses. Glasses augment me. They make me have better vision. They're awesome technology. I want to do things like that, but in the realm of intelligence. So one example I already mentioned, cognition. So you can call this assistive neurotechnology. It's essentially a cutting-edge neurotech company, but they've chosen to apply and drive their work by this very practical and important task, which is helping people communicate who have disabilities. It turns out that that's not just a nice thing. It actually shapes how you choose to do your research, which problems you're taking on, which problems you're going to solve. And that also, of course, makes it gratifying that you are, in fact, solving those problems. The next thing I'll bring up is a company called Mindstrong. It's in mental illness. It's a telemedicine company in mental illness. So if you have serious mental illness, psychotic things, or PTSD, or things like this, which is a very underserved area of healthcare. There is not enough service, not enough psychiatrists and so on to go around. But one of the biggest problems with mental illness is that you can't predict it. It's very hard to know. It's not like you can do a blood test for psychosis. So they came up with a scheme, which I'll show you a slide in a second, for digital brain biomarkers. And let me use that slide to explain, but let me introduce a couple more companies and come back. So another company I'm going to show you some more detail is called Sherpa. And they're also about helping people live better lives with virtual assistants. And their particular thing is on personalized and predictive AI. That's about making it a real personalized assistant that really knows you and your life. And the fourth example I'm going to talk about is this Migraine.ai, which is about predicting migraines from the data you can get on your phone. Let me drill a little bit on a couple of these. Mindstrong is fascinating because if you think about when you use the phone every day, you look at the screen, you have hand-eye coordination, you're moving around, you're sometimes struggling with the UI, sometimes succeeding, you're using lots and lots and lots of cognition. Turns out that you're just really loading your brain up to operate these devices. And that is a very effective cognitive function test. If you were to go to a neurologist and have them do things with your fingers and your balance and so on, those are tests of how your nerves are working. The phone is a great test of how your brain is working. And Mindstrong has come up with a deep neural net model that can take the data from how you use your phone, like how you use the keyboard, how you stroke it and so on, to predict breakdowns in cognitive function, which are predictive of severe mental illness. It's phenomenal that they can predict at all because human beings have zero predictive power for mental illness. And these machines now, based on just passive measurements of something you're already doing, are able to predict on time so people can get into the hospital and get their medication or get some advice from the counselor. So this is really gratifying that they can pull this off. Sherpa, it is, like I said, they're kind of doing a virtual assistant thing, and they developed all this technology for prediction. What I want to talk about today just for a minute is, guess what? That technology that helps people, like for instance, you get in your car, it tells you where you're going to go, so they can help give you advice about your day, or predicts what news you might be interested in, things like this. That turns out that when COVID-19 hit Spain, so Sherpa is based in Bilbao, Spain. When COVID hit Spain, it hit hard, right? Because Italy and then Spain. But they had a little head start because Italy was already in full-blown hair on fire mode. So Sherpa took that technology for prediction and applied it to predict COVID in their country. And they were able to show with high accuracy which spots were going to be hot spots and like which ICU units were going to be loaded up and over what time course. And this is the kind of company that I really like to support, because they're doing it for humanity, but they're also doing technology that helps them do their product. Finally, this company, Migraine.ai, they also have this app that can help you predict your migraines. Like you type in like how you feeling, get skin temperature or things like this, or sleep. And migraines are super hard to predict. For those of you who suffer, realize that, oh my God, they're really hard to predict. Even most educated people are using sort of superstitious techniques for predicting. And yet, if you can predict a migraine, you can then predict when to take your medicine if you have some, or like whether you should sleep more or eat differently or something. And they were getting really good at the migraine prediction thing, and then COVID hit. And it turns out that the very technology they use for sort of getting the data from you about how your day's going to predict migraines is going to be highly effective at predicting COVID. In fact, one of the techniques they do is you take a little voice sample or a video sample of you. Well, they have samples now of coughing, for instance. As you cough, it can tell whether it's the kind of cough that's predictive of COVID, among other things. So again, using the neural net models to predict from many, many dimensions of data, this kind of tricky thing to predict whether you have COVID or not, because a lot of people just call it symptom-free. So it's almost today, for the first 2.5 days, humans don't have any ability to predict that you have COVID. So if we can nail that with AI, we could bring it down to 0 and then be able to obviously do a better job of managing this thing. So if you're interested, I put this screen on on the screen, because the CEO, once you just contact him, he's got this email at the bottom. I'll scan it at ViroLogic.io. ViroLogic is the app called. It's going to be distributed to companies. So if you have a company that self-insures or has a large contract with the insurer, that's the way this is going to get distributed, and then you can save a lot of lives, hopefully, with that. Okay, so I wanted to give a lot of time for Q&A, and I think I've succeeded. So that's my brief overview on this philosophy of humanistic AI, the idea that you would augment or collaborate with people instead of building AI that competes with them. But most importantly, the really bigger picture idea to remember is that having a philosophy, having what I call a guiding philosophy, can make it so that you can choose which projects to do, which not only help you know when you're succeeding and know which things to do, but also, I think in retrospect, help you attract better people to work with you. And as we all know, to do really big things, it takes a lot of people. So I'm going to close on that. Thank you very much, and leave it to open it up for some good conversation interactively.
That was incredible. I mean, when I was suggesting to go in this direction, I had no idea that you'd be able to share all this information. Thank you so much. Have some questions, and some of them are drilling down on what you were discussing. And I wanted to start with the predictive migraine, or if you can predict a cough then, with COVID. What else might an entrepreneur think about how they could use predictive AI? What other uses might using that same philosophy be applicable to?
That's a really good question. Well, the first thing I would ask is which things are worth predicting? So start with what problems are there, so that if you could predict them, you could do something better for humanity. So I'll give you a straw man. If you're trying to predict whether clicking on an ad will work or not, that's not helping humanity. Or predicting what signals will keep someone addicted to a website, not helping. Okay, we've done that already. We have superhuman performance at that scale already. But what if you're talking about predicting, say, for instance, whether or not you are in need of medical care? There's a lot of places where it's a scarcity. So we don't know whether it's hard to get medical care. Maybe if you're in Africa, you walk 2 days to get to the doctor. Or maybe if you're in a place like the US, which has no medical system, you're just poor and you don't have a job. So you don't really want to go get medical care. So, but you need to know. So if you could have a system that can predict whether the consequences of you not getting medical care, it doesn't diagnose for you. It's not a doctor. It's not replacing the doctor. It's just saying whether or not you should go to a doctor. There's also techniques where understanding like your psychology, which is a lot of ways that people get, like for instance, if you want to manage chronic disease in the US and in Western Europe, the dominant cause of chronic disease is behavior, human behavior. So we have a problem with human behavior. So if you could predict what things in your life are causing you to eat that thing or not exercise or do that thing that's damaging you or drink too much or whatever, then that can help you live a better life. And that can also, by the way, make you a ton of money if you solve that problem.
And I like how you were discussing the strategy, that you really thought this through. And my next question is about Siri. When you were in the early days of that project, did you have any concept of how the scale of it? Did you foresee it being as widely adopted as it has become today?
My two co-founders, Adam Trier and Doug Kidlos, they're all visionaries, and we thought big. Yeah, we wanted it to be big. We did think it was going to be the biggest thing on mobile in terms of the new e-commerce. But it was only when we were offered by, Steve Jobs offered us the opportunity to be part of a platform, like the platform, that we were able to think, oh my God, we could actually change a decent chunk of human lives with doing this. And that's why we accepted his offer. So we could, scale. And there's it wasn't trivial, because to go from a few million users to 100, 200 million overnight with no beta program is, as you engineers would appreciate, a difficult challenge. But with the fact that we could have that impact got everybody out of bed in the morning, got us able to do it.
Yeah, what an exciting thing to be part of, and I think of Steve Jobs and just how um, just how profoundly visionary he was as well, to recognize what you had accomplished. Impact advising. Next question. When you use the word impact, how do you define that? I mean, and you're using it as an advisor, what would be an example of an impact advisory role versus one that's just advisory?
Yeah, I mean, again, you advise a company instead of start one because you want to be leveraged, right? I can advise 10 companies instead of having to start 10 of them. And the idea, though, is to create in those companies the ability for them to impact the world, not for me personally. But given that, whether a project impacts the world is like, how many people's lives will be changed and in what way? We start with the kind of body count of human lives, I think. So like I've been happy to show a progression of adding zeros to the number of people I've impacted with each company. And that's kind of a scalability that I subscribe to. Now, there's also impact in terms of like good versus non-good. So there is extractive industry, and then there's industry that contributes to the common. And so I tend to focus on things that don't extract and that contribute. That's an easy thing to say, kind of, but I mean, if you're faced with a question like, hey, someone just offered you $1 zillion to work at some company, and what they're going to do is, take more oil out of the ground and put it in the air or whatever, it's tempting, right? But there's often ways to turn it around where you can take the same. Here's an example: surveillance technology. We have technology that can find out where everyone is and what they're doing. And we know that we use it on social media. We know we sell them advertising with it in the US. And in Russia and China, they use it to surveil their populations. Increasingly, those lines are being blurred, unfortunately. Now, that technology, computer vision and profiling and all this identity, that stuff can also be used for tracking people who are aging in place so that they can live with dignity at home, alone or in small groups, and not have to be in an institution, while they're getting older. And so there's a choice, like, be good at this surveillance tech, but use it for a good purpose. And you can still make $1 zillion doing the latter.
Yeah. What are you currently most excited about?
Well, I am excited about these sort of mental health and healthcare applications all of a sudden, because I think it's the next big thing. I mean, if you combine it with synthetic biology, we have this point where human knowledge, well-intended and well-guided, can really make a big difference in improving the world's lives. We didn't have that opportunity up until this decade, but now we have this thing where just the sheer inventiveness of thought and discovery can actually drive progress in way faster than it used to be able to do. It used to be a few people thought big thoughts and had discoveries, and a bunch of people did a bunch of drudgery. So these technologies of synthetic biology and computer science, of course, and then the healthcare that's driven by all this informatics, means that we as computer scientists can do things now with AI, where the AI is doing essentially knowledge work, just bits, just thinking thoughts and so on, but that work is useful work. And that's the most exciting thing to me.
Fantastic. All right. I have just a whole range of questions. Where do you think, you're in Northern California, and they've always talked about Northern California as a mecca for technology, and certainly it is. Where do you think one should reside geographically to innovate at the highest scale? Or what are your opinions about where you are physically located to do the kind of work that you do? Do you think you could have accomplished these great things if you were, say, in Des Moines, Iowa?
Well, you know what? I was going to be flippant answer, but maybe it's not so flippant. I mean, the new answer is in front of a good screen with a good internet connection. Seems to be what you need right now.
Yeah.
And we're going to see the creation of virtual communities now because of COVID that we didn't see before. This has been in the works, like Introspect, that company I mentioned, was about virtual communities for business. But we're going to see a billion people or 2 billion people need to change the way they work together, right? And if we do that well, we can really open up the possibility to live where you want to live.
Yep.
I always wanted to live in New Zealand. It's the best, safest place on the earth right now. I mean, if I
Is it?
become, oh yeah, New Zealand's nailed it. They have enlightened leadership and they beat COVID. So, and it's also a fantastically beautiful place. Yeah.
Oh.
Now, go to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Oh, Northern California is great too. You just have to pay a bunch of money in taxes. Other than that, it's perfect.
Another question is, so you have put together great teams or joined teams or advised teams. What are the characteristics of someone that I mean, when you're deciding who's going to be on the team, what are you looking for?
Well, I'm usually on the begging end when I'm raising a team. When I'm, there's great people out there, and please come work with us. So yeah. There are great people out there. You're looking for, obviously you want people who are performers and brilliant, have done things. That's easier to see now than it used to be. Especially software used to be really hard. It's hard to tell whether someone's a 10x person or just a regular programmer. Now it's getting easier because they do things like open source projects and so on. But the other thing is that I think it's more important that you put together a team whose hearts are aligned with their minds and with each other's, right? And if you get that, then the corporate overhead of communications and collaboration and all that go way down. And I don't know, easier said than done. There's a chemistry there.
All right. Final question. What are you going to be working on in the near term?
Well, I am working on all these projects with AI for healthcare, mental health care, and so on. But I think in the near term, maybe in the medium term, my second or third career ambition is to do collective intelligence.
Oh.
So I think check back in 5 years or 10 years, and you might see accomplishment there. I think we've scratched the surface here.
Yeah.
There's a lot we can do to make us. I mean, if we look around, like the systems we have are failing catastrophically. Look at our political systems, our ability to manage our environment, our ability to act collectively is just really in dire need. And so I think we have a chance now, as long as the internet remains free, in both senses of free, I think we have a chance of solving this problem.
That's fantastic. Well, I think let's end on a very positive note. Tom, what an encore talk. This was fantastic.